Welcome everyone. Really, I do not have much to say except to just acknowledge how wonderful it is for Archbishop Tutu and Mrs. Leah Tutu and their family to be surrounded by friends. Friends they've known and people who are friends in different ways, particularly all my colleagues who have been part of this conference. We started these conferences in 2006, and when we did, we were celebrating his 75th birthday as well as the 10th anniversary of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. So this particular one, we celebrate the 20th anniversary of, I'm told that I should speak close to the mic, the 20th anniversary of the completion of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report. And he is known as a rabble-rouser, and anything with his name is supposed to arouse a lot of rubble. And so this conference has been marked by lots of rubble. That's because we named it after him. We're celebrating him. So thank you very, very much to you all.
We are together to express gratitude, to honor those who served, who led, who were involved in different ways. We especially honor those who testified, who told their stories of truth, vulnerability, and pain, stories of trauma and brokenness. We honor those who told stories of truth, guilt, and shame. We honor those who shared, who showed and shared so much grace and embrace, forgiveness and absolution, letting go, setting free. In celebrating the TRC, there are at least two sets of mandates that the TRC left us with that we still did not address adequately as South Africans. I think Archbishop Tutu left us years ago already with two very crucial, at least two mandates. Let me turn to the first one, and I'll be very brief and try to go not longer than the allocated 7 minutes. 7 is the perfect figure in some traditions. My wife intuitively mentioned this first mandate in June this year when she traveled with me to a town, Bridgetown, in the Northern Cape. About 120 persons from Bridgetown and surrounding towns in that central Karoo rural areas came together from different backgrounds, from different walks of life, and also from different color groups and socio-economic positions. They gathered to worship in the White Dutch Reformed Church and to also interact with each other and to tell their stories. And one of the stories was of this white farmer who said for the first time in his life he went to a prayer meeting in one of the black townships, and what totally changed him was how he heard people pray for the farms in the context of challenges with lack of water, with droughts that they experienced, and they prayed for protection. And he changed totally his own thinking about South Africa and the way forward. He experienced proximity, closeness with people in that meeting. And this proximity is one of the gifts that the TRC and Arch Tutu brought to us. And I'm glad that we have one of the world's top thinkers, Prof. Homi Baba here, who in his work really helps us very much in different parts of the world to try and understand life in proximity. Proximity, nearness, closeness, amidst diversity and amidst continuous trauma and pain and injustice. To live closely, to be exposed to each other, to ensure that we live with porous skins so that osmosis can take place, so that we can really identify with each other, and that through this osmotic process we can say we develop hybridic identities, meaning I mingle so much with you that I don't stay the same anymore. I become more. I get rid of minimalistic identities. Minimalistic identities, in his work, we learn, are identities of anxiety because they have to protect. They have to be defensive. But rather, through osmosis and hybridity, we develop maximalistic identities. We are always more. Archbishop Tutu taught us about maximalistic identities. He once said, you know, I'm a good ecumenical because I'm a good Anglican. As an Anglican, yes, I'm Anglican, but I'm also much more. And so we can say, I'm black, but through my mingling, my life in proximity, my hybridic living with people from other groups, I am more than just black. So we can say regarding LGBTIQA, so we can say regarding gender challenges, even challenges of nationalism, and in a world of tribalism and absolutism and populism and of no tolerance for plurality, we need to hear the message of hybridity and life in proximity and maximalistic identities, much more forthcoming from people like our Arch and thinkers like Homi Bhabha. So my wife's appeal was, number one, the TRC taught us to have more Bridgetowns, to have more little TRCs in our towns and villages and cities, on our campuses, in our country, all countries of the world. And in this, colleague Pumla, you play such a big role. Because just 2 weeks again, colleagues at Stellenbosch from different color groups pleaded that we have more safe spaces where we can learn about life in proximity. We need skills for that life. And thanks for building our competencies on our own campuses, on our own campus, and much wider than Stellenbosch for this life in proximity. The second one, very briefly, and with this I conclude. Archbishop Tutu wrote a book which we all know, No Future Without Forgiveness. And this is the second mandate that the TRC and Prof. Tutu, Arch Tutu leaves us with. This mandate is, at the TRC we saw a lot of forgiveness, embrace, grace. The question is whether we see the fruit of forgiveness. Forgiveness is about hospitality. It invites us. To what does it invite us? And this conference has captured it so well. Forgiveness paves the way for contrition and confession. For the hours of this conference that we can add to, the redemptive hours, I want to say. Forgiveness invites us to a life of remorse and repentance, a life of recognition and reconciliation, a life of reparation and restoration. Forgiveness longs for restitution and renewal. And I think until now we didn't respond faithfully to the invitation, the hospitality, the plea, the longing of forgiveness. To assess the TRC is to assess ourselves as South Africans. How do we respond to these two challenges? So tonight is about celebration. Celebrating Arch, And Arch, this is perhaps inappropriate, but I asked some of my colleagues, Dr. Leslie van Rooy, our Senior Director for Social Impact and Transformation, and I asked him, what should I tell the Arch? Just tell the Arch. We need him. So Arch, we offer gratitude. In celebrating, we receive more illumination and inspiration. In celebrating, we commit ourselves afresh to the imperatives and the civic callings and the public vocations forthflowing from your example, your work that you did in so many contexts. And tonight, especially your work that you did in a commission that was instituted by us and for us. We celebrate you tonight and thank you for the privilege and the pleasure that we can do it in the presence of yourself and your dear ones. Thank you, Arch.
My dearest friend, and someone who's influenced my life so much, Arch, and you've given me permission to call you this tonight again, and I appreciate that. So my name's Mary Montague. I come from a place called Belfast in Northern Ireland, and I have the honour and the privilege of giving this speech to remind Arch of the wonderful work that he did quietly in the background and support that he offered us in the Northern Ireland peace process. It is a real privilege to be delivering this speech. I have worked most of my life in peace building, and now I stand in front of one of my greatest heroes, someone I have learned from and who has influenced me in my work. Across the years, your influence stretched across South Africa, across the world, into homes of ordinary people like me. You stood firm for justice and peace and reconciliation. You have touched my life and many others through deepening our faith, giving us hope for positive change, and achieving all of that you have achieved through grace, prayer, and a wonderful sense of humour. And so I want to start with a joke. So there was this priest, because you know I'm Catholic. So there was this priest, and of course he had no money, because Catholics don't have a lot of money. So he had no money. He was in a very poor parish, and every day, for 8 days, he went into his church, he raised his hands, and he said, "Please, Lord, let me win the lottery." And on the 9th day, when he went in and raised his arms, a booming voice came back to him from the altar. And it said, "At least help yourself a little, buy a ticket." So there are many similarities between South Africa and Northern Ireland. But of course, in a serious note, your depth of suffering has been far greater than ours. The number of victims much larger. So how did I come to hear about this place called South Africa? I heard it from my father. My father was a man who strove to educate us in values and principles of peace and justice, and to open our minds to other places in the world that had a struggle. In our home, we had prayer every night. We said the rosary. And my dad had us pray for prisoner number 11657-63, your wonderful friend, Nelson Mandela. For he was sentenced to life imprisonment and my father was so upset by that. My dad taught us about apartheid, which, sir, I later learnt that you termed the nightmare of apartheid. A system that wasn't just about discrimination, but reduced people not to be second-class citizens, but even less than that, lesser human beings. A system that totally dehumanized people. The world was watching, and Ireland in particular was watching. We rejoiced in my family when the Olympic Committee barred South Africa from participating in the Games. We became aware very quickly of the civil rights movement happening in South Africa and of course in other parts of the world as well. And you referred it to the Prague Spring. And young people and young students were taking up the call for rights for people and minorities across the world. And it caught the imagination of many people in Northern Ireland. We had a local civil rights movement that had a series of marches and protests calling for greater equality. I was 16 at that time, and I was part of the Young Democrats, a sort of junior wing to the civil rights. My father was very worried about this, and it was wonderful for me to be able to say, well, now listen, Dad, Desmond Tutu says this is a good thing. But on a serious note, it was about looking at sectarianism and how there was deep-rooted and systemic discrimination in housing, in jobs, and my poor father, wonderful as he was not able to vote. Although we were working for our own civil rights, we didn't lose sight of South Africa. Dunnes Stores, one of the big outlets across Ireland, Irish trade unions had called for a boycott of South African goods, and they called that because you had asked for that, Arch. Dunnes Stores called, some of their workers refused to handle those goods and ended up having to go on strike. You really paid a great tribute to those workers when you met some of them at Heathrow Airport, such a busy life as you were having. You took time out to meet them and to praise them for their courage in fighting for a cause that they believed in. You respected and honoured their contribution. We remember nice times with you. We remember your Nobel Peace Prize. And in your acceptance speech, again, we learnt about our faith. You said that this proved that this was God's world and He was in charge, demonstrating to me and my family your deep faith. And during your Nobel lecture, you mentioned Ulster, the 6 counties, the north of Ireland, whatever term you want to use, and other places in the world. But you were very clear. When there is injustice, invariably peace becomes a casualty. When there is political struggles, tensions increase at times during funerals, and further violence can occur. At the end of an emotional funeral here for 4 people killed 2 weeks before, there were riots, and you found yourself rescuing a suspected informer. And at that time you said, the system is hated with a passionate hate, and anyone who's perceived collaborating is an enemy of the struggle. That is no longer just a slogan. They are quite angry at these people whom they regard as co-oppressors. We were hearing this across the world, and especially a certain priest, Father Alec Reid. We too witnessed more violence around times of very emotional funerals. There was a funeral attacked by a man called Michael Stone, who you would later meet. And then a week later, at the funeral of the man he had killed, 2 British soldiers, 2 British corporals were killed in the streets of our parish. Father Alec Reid, a Redemptorist, a Catholic priest, gave the soldiers the last rites. He had unsuccessfully attempted to prevent their murder. But I know Father Alec, he looked upon you, Arch, as a role model for Christian leadership. And secretly, in his pocket on that day, he was acting as a conduit between the leaders of republicanism and nationalism. And he was carrying documents detailing Sinn Féin's position on a democratic resolution of our troubles. He was following your lead. You became Archbishop, and again we celebrated. We love celebrating. So we celebrated, but the learning for us as you became Archbishop was your message to us. Liberation, you said, and I quote, liberation from sin in all its manifestations. Liberation to be all that God wants his children to be. And that was your message. This was the theme of your leadership. You continued challenging, protesting, regardless of the risks. And you said, we received death threats, yes, but you see, when you are in a struggle, there are going to have to be casualties. And why should you be exempt? And you went on to say, I never doubted that we were going to be free, because ultimately I knew there was no way in which a lie could prevail over the truth, darkness over light, and death over life. Teaching us all the importance of hope, even when violence and peace efforts seem to be futile. Through these years, we were still living our own nightmare. In the 1980s, we seen hunger strikes, which led to 10 political prisoners dying, bloody mayhem in our streets, shootings, bombs, and yet quietly in the background, people were working for peace. I remember in those years feeling worn down, tired, and realizing that this abnormal life was beginning to feel normal. And then, from this wonderful country of South Africa, came a sign of great hope. We seen the release of Nelson Mandela on February 11th in 1990. Well, my dad was so delighted. And he was very ill at the time, and his words were, "This is such good news." Unfortunately, my father never lived to see Mandela become president. But not only was my father and my family looking at what was happening in South Africa, but so was Martin McGuinness and others. And in his words, it also challenged us to think about our own situation. You led the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And Arch, what you said within the final report, you stated, having looked the beast of the past in the eye, having asked and received forgiveness, and having made amends, let us shut the door on the past, not to forget it, but in order not to allow it to imprison us. Something we are still having to learn. The good news was for us that we got our ceasefires in 1994, and ceasefires from all of the armed groups. But even after ceasefires, things do not necessarily go smoothly. And you became a great voice to us, sending us messages, challenging the political leadership to have inclusive talks, and not to lose hope, and not to lose out on the opportunity. You said, don't let any feel that they have been left out. Any group, however small, which has grievances, real or imaginary, must not feel excluded. Otherwise, you can kiss goodbye to peace. Let them be represented by those they regard as their authentic spokespeople. And that was such an important message so that we could get the people we needed at the table. You also called for compromise, saying, one of the things you have got to accept is that compromise is the name of the game. You are not likely to get all the things you want, but this process of give and take is much better than people being killed. Then our miracle happened. The Belfast or the Good Friday Agreement was signed on the 10th of April in 1998 and supported and approved by all the people of Ireland in a referendum on May the 22nd. And I'm sure you remember, Arch, the important role that Mo Molan played in the run-up and throughout those talks. Something that unfortunately a lot of people have forgotten the role that she played. But I want to share with you something that she said about you. For Mo herself played this tribute to you. More than anyone I have met, Desmond Tutu is full of courage, full of faith in humanity's capacity for good, and his voice to me has always been an inspiration. She worked, even though she was suffering from cancer, long hours, and with her informal ways moved things forward greatly for us and was strengthened by you. Even after the Good Friday Agreement, things were still stalling, holding back, being held back, and you came to visit Gerry Adams in Connolly House when he invited you there. Of course you were in trouble for doing that. You were always in trouble. Connolly House is just 2 streets away from where I live. Me and my husband have lived there for 45 years. Now we need you to come back. But the next time you come back, Arch, I want to make sure you come round to my house for a wee drop of tea. The movement towards implementing the agreement had stalled, and there were calls for decommissioning. You shared your wisdom with all the key players, including Adams, Trimble and Hume. You talked about South Africa, how they had faced many crises, and you exchanged ideas on how to overcome the deadlock. You came back to visit us in 2001, to the Global Citizen Circle. And when you were there, again, you spoke to people, peace builders like me, and you told us, you said this, gee whiz, we have made a wonderful breakthrough, and we were euphoric and found ourselves on cloud 9. The next moment, we were plunged into despondency. So those words lifted our spirits. Somebody knows what we're going through. And again, your timing was impeccable, because we faced riots in the streets and the Holy Cross school dispute at an Ardown interface, which is where the communities have a wall or roads that divide them. We are very segregated. We live in pockets like a patchwork quilt. You went to visit the Holy Cross School, and you went there to do something very beautiful, to reassure the children and to tell them how lovable they were. And you also offered your help to find a solution. Okay. You lobbied and campaigned for us to think about a truth commission, and you came forward in a programme that was organised by the BBC called Face the Truth. In that, you met Michael Stone, and he met and you facilitated the conversations between himself and Sylvia and Rodney Haggett, the widow and the brother of a man that Michael Stone was convicted of murdering. Fergal Keane asked Sylvia whether she had thought it was the right thing to come and meet Michael Stone. She said, "I had waited so long for this day. It brought me a little bit of healing." We are still struggling to find a way through and to deal with our legacy of our past. But I'm going to put my trust in God like you have taught me. A God of seeing, a God of healing, and a God of delivery. I was going to speak a bit on forgiveness, but I'm very short of time. All I will say is that, Arch, I'm still learning about it. I have been reading the wonderful things that you have written about it. And one of the things that has touched me is that you've said, forgiveness is not pretending that things are other than they are. Forgiveness can be confrontational, telling it as it is, looking the beast in the eye. It is also a process that does not exclude hatred and anger. Those emotions are all part of being human. You should never hate yourself for hating others who do terrible things. The depth of your love is shown by the extent of your anger. So I'm still learning and I am trying. Can I just close with inviting my husband to present to you a gift that we have brought from Ireland. And as he presents it, I just want to give you an Irish blessing, you and your family and your wife, this Irish blessing. It comes from John O'Donoghue, who is a brilliant poet and a very spiritual, Celtic spiritual person. May the angel of memory surprise you in bleak times with new gifts from the harvest of your vanished days. May you allow no dark hand to quench the candle of hope in your heart. May the outside voices of fear and despair find no echo in you. And may you know that despite confusion, anxiety and emptiness, your name, Arch Desmond Tutu, is written in heaven. Amen.
When I looked at who is around here, I was reminded of an occasion, not unlike this one, pretty much at the time that we were beginning to do the work with the TRC, and we had a gathering like this, I think in KZN. And I think the Archbishop was doing, he was preaching. And then he was in full flight, as you know he can be. And then at some point, you know, he wanted to emphasize this point about the law of the meat, the law of the meat. Of course, you know, as Christians, those who are Christians, you want to say law of the meat and the patience. But I mean, you couldn't just get his tongue around that. He said, the Lord. I said, you're me. The meat and the patience. Me! But it's not my mother tongue. So I'm sorry to be laughing at my own jokes, but they are not my own jokes. They are the Archbishop's jokes. The last one. The last one that I remember is when he was recalling an occasion, and because I've got to keep it short, and it's not intended to be a bad omen. He recalls an occasion when there was a celebration of a 60th anniversary of a married couple, and at that occasion, he says the person, the husband, was asked, had you ever thought of a divorce in your long period of marriage to your wife? Because he said, no, divorce, no. Murder, yes. but the most recent one is one I read too. I think he had been invited to go and it was the occasion of, I think, a celebration of a 400-year-old church. I don't know, quite recent, I think it was in Italy or something. So the Arch tells the story of how the celebrations went on. I mean, people talk about, the longevity of this edifice, 400 years, this, that, and the next thing, until there was this young guy, and as wise as young people sometimes can be. The young person comes to him and says, how old were you when this was built? So you must have been more than 400 years. He had that kind of infectious laugh, even with us, because, just to round this up, I need to say this, that for him to have managed to deal with people like me and put them on the straight and narrow was an achievement. Because, like in any organizations, there were occasions when, he must have felt, or he must have come to Mamle and said, man, I don't know what I let myself into. Because there will be arguments. I mean, everybody has an opinion. Mary had an opinion, though he expressed that nice, as only Mary can do, not me, not Alex, not everybody else. So it was a task for the Archbishop to deal with all these 17 people and deal in a way that was able to produce the kind of outcome that our 6 volumes have been. It can only be that this was a leader, and he was able to appeal and command respect from atheists like me, from Christians, from Muslims, from all kinds of people. Maybe I'm not an atheist, maybe I'm an agnostic. But anyway, but so was the Archbishop. We will always remember him for having been the kind of leader who had moral authority. And if there is nothing else that caused all of us to feel that we had a leader whom we had to follow, it was because he had, and I hope to be able to say, he still has that moral authority. I am less of a bad person today because I met him.
I think from the Talata family, firstly we want to honor you. Firstly for your love and for showing us who the God is that you serve. Secondly, we want to honor you for your bravery, for your courage, and for showing us what it means to walk in truth, and what it means to walk in light, what it means to walk in justice, and what it means to walk in courage. As Ma was pointing out a little bit just now, when at the funeral of the Kradok 4, she was sitting next to my mother, and my mom always tells the story of how Ma was rubbing her tummy because she was pregnant at the time. And it's obvious to us that the two of you have had a long relationship with our family. Many years later, you were then chairing the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and even then you looked after my mom, and you gave her the very first opportunity to be able to tell her side of the story. In the first inquest, I think it was Judge Arthur Chaskelson, or Advocate Chaskelson, that spoke on her behalf. Excuse me. At the second inquest, it was Advocate George Bezos that spoke on her behalf. So at the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was the first time that Umama got to, where she got to tell her own story. And you gave her the platform and the support for her to do so. So I just really want to honor you, sir, and now Imam, for everything that you've done for our family. You have meant, excuse me, you've meant a lot to us over the years, and we appreciate that. And in '98, you handed over, and as we saw in the short clip, in '98 you handed over the report to the government and to the ANC. And there were certain recommendations that those volumes of reports put to the African National Congress and the government that it leads. And over the years, there are some recommendations that have, most of them haven't been implemented. And over the last couple of years, I have, after having had a conversation with Advocate George Bezos, who said to me that I must try and make as much noise as I possibly could to try and get the government of the day to prosecute the people that were responsible for the murders of the Kradok 4. So I've been trying to do that. And I do that because I am able to, because I stand on your shoulders today. Because of the path that you had walked, the path of bravery, of courage, you have allowed a young man like myself to be able to look at the journey, to look at your steps, and to try and follow in those steps as much as possible. There's certain works of the TRC that remain uncompleted, sir, and I stand before you today to assure you that when it comes to the aspect of the prosecutions and the recommendations that the TRC had made, I will push as much as I can to make sure that your work was not in vain.
Thank you, Pumla. We didn't know what to expect.
Didn't trust me.
But I mean, to be able to sit next to Judge LB6 and to be reminded of the price that he paid for our liberation. You look at him and you say, yeah, and I always have the image of this car going up in an explosion in Lorenzo Marx, Maputo.
Dating yourself.
And I don't, I mean, some of you or most of you will recall that strange image of, yeah, you see a collection of clothes, and then there's a sort of a movement in those clothes. Thank you. Thank you. We are here in our country at the point at which we are because of the contribution, the sacrifice that people such as you have made. Baya Danki.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Then we have, I mean, you chose to honor me as the chair of the TRC. But obviously, of course, it would have been absolutely nothing without the TRC people like Mary Burton, gentle, quiet, almost unassuming, that people like herself were the ones who worked on the coal face. I just got the kudos. But it is people like herself, people like Glenda Whitskirt, who were the people who did all the work. And yes, it is a pain to think that Alex is not here. Alex Borain. We all know that we would not have been able to start the work of the TRC without him. He found us accommodation, he employed people, he did everything, and I got the credit. I mean, we had extraordinary people like Dumisa Nsebeza, who were able to help guide our TRC in the path that it walked. And yes, the credit was given to creatures like me. And the real reason is actually that I have a prominent nose. and my wife, I always listen to my wife. She says, I said, this nose, and she says, yes, and a short name. And she's actually really saying, I ought to begin to shut up. But we give great thanks to all of you for the various contributions that you have made to bring us to the point at which we are. We hope so very much that we are not going to spoil a good thing. What came into being in South Africa was a fantastic thing. And please God, let us not spoil it. And people like Marlene Leroux with their artscape and music and drama, we hope will be able to remind us and our children of the price that was paid by so many to bring us to where we are. Thank you, all of you, for coming. Thank you for your various contributions to helping us. Thank you, thank you, thank you.